Oh, hello. I am very on time today. I just realized I started my countdown timer a little early, but hello and welcome to day 3 of my embroidery of some Fear of God sneakers that I am embroidering with a inspiration and like of the Spoon Sport livery. Yeah, so I wanted today to go over my progress. I'm gonna keep working, and yeah, but I guess to start I will just kind of recap for anybody who's joining new what I have been working on and kind of where the concept came from. For those of you joining me for the first time, my name is Erin and I like to make stuff. So what you can expect from me here is I go live weekly to just share whatever the current project is that I'm working on. And so right now it's these pair of shoes. And let's see. So this is just like my kind of concept board. I find that I end up using a mixture of Pinterest, usually when I start collecting ideas and photos, as well as just like a Google slide document to start dumping in photos and concept and things like that as I'm working. So Spoon Sport, for those of you that are car people, you're gonna know it's a really iconic livery, and I am not the expert by any means in the car or racing culture. However, my husband is. It's something that he really loves, and so this is a collaboration between the two of us, where he really designed the shoe and then I am the one creating it. So yeah, this is the livery. It exists in a couple different ways. Sometimes it's a little bit more jagged, sometimes it's a little bit more feeling paint-like. And then this is the original sneaker that my husband designed, kind of 2 variations of them. And so I went ahead and I tried making that. So that was really the first custom shoe I had ever done. And I hand painted it, making some basic stencils out of tape. And I think it turned out pretty well. You can see them here behind me. We don't wear them because the paint's really heavy, but it was just the first experience in learning, and yeah, it was really fun to make them. So we ended up going to a museum in Den Bosh, which is in the south of the Netherlands, and it was a sneaker exhibit called Sneaker Unboxed, and there you can see over here there is a pair of Fear of Gods, and they were bright yellow, and as soon as I saw them I was like, wow, those are really cool. They're high tops. I wonder if those could become like a second pair of Spoon livery shoes. And I had just started to learn how to embroider at the time, because it's a new skill that I wanted to learn, because I feel that my crocheting, I've made most of the projects I could possibly make right now, and I was looking for something in the evening time to work on. And I was like, oh, I could do this. I could figure out how to embroider them. They're fabric. And so we are here. And it has not been as easy as I thought, but it's been really fun. So, you know, how did I kind of come up with, you know, at this point, it's like a little bit more transitioning now to the way I think about stuff. And, you know, when I looked at the shoe and I looked at like, well, the mechanics of embroidery and the fabric on the shoe itself, on the toe box that you can see in the photo, it's like a neoprene, which isn't going to embroider very well. But then the rest of the shoe has this like mesh. And I thought, oh, that is possible to embroider. I think I could probably do that. But then it turned into, if I just tried to repeat the exact same design, it wouldn't really work, because if I can't embroider the toe, then well, how am I going to do it? Am I going to reverse it? And I had to just think on it. And so I took an image of a Fear of Gods and put it into Photoshop and just started to hand kind of figure it out and paint it, and came up with this design where I would do like a reverse. So instead of thinking of the shoe, because typically I think when we look at the designs of the shoe, it's almost like the toe of the shoe is the hood of the car, and then of course the back of the shoe is the back of the car. So it's almost like a one-for-one representation, and that's most of the designs that my husband came up with and that I've also helped execute, which is really cool. But in this case, because of the actual shoe itself, I'm not able to do that. So yeah, I came up with this to kind of do like a reverse and switch it around where it's more of an interpretation than almost like a literal trying to transport the livery onto the shoe. So that is the design. And I'm gonna come on over here and get started to work. Also, I am trying out some different camera angles. You can see my little stash of things over there. I'm trying out some different camera angles just to see what works best in terms of what isn't too distracting, but also gives a good angle as I'm working, so that way you all can see what it is I'm working on and it's a lot clearer. So camera angle 3 from top down, let me know how you like it, because I will keep playing with them. So I've got my my tools. So for embroidery, because the shoe is already as is and I can't take off the fabric and put it into an embroidery hoop. So typically, my understanding is when we embroider, we'll embroider in a hoop, but I can't do that. So I just have the shoe and I'm doing the best that I can on the shoe as it exists. And as it kind of moves around, which is definitely affecting the stitch itself. This is my progress so far. So I think last week I almost finished this section. So I ended up finishing here, and at the end of my stream there was a question from Austin that he was asking. I think he was asking about this line here and like why there was a gap. And so on this section of the shoe, this plastic, in some spots it is fixed and glued to this mesh underneath, and in other parts it actually can lift up. So it's difficult to get the needle really close up. So I ended up, I think it looks okay, I don't know, to just try to get my needle as close as I can, and ended up finishing it with a line. So yeah, this section here, you can see it doesn't exactly match like the overall flow of the stitch, like it kind of is in a completely different direction, but it does fill it in. And I guess from far away, if it's really far away, you know, it's gonna be on his feet, that you're only going to notice the difference in the embroidery stitch if you're really close to it, because I have been looking at these from across the room, and what's really cool about actually this floss is that it's really shiny, and so it kind of glistens. And so right now for me, success looks like I can fill it in, and from far away it looks like the livery. I have been struggling to feel like, well, what stitch am I doing embroidery wise, because it's new for me. However, I'm giving myself kind of the space as a creative to say, okay, as long as it gets filled, as long as it looks pretty decent, as long as I have relatively even stitches so they're not gonna pull out and get messed up, like in terms of snag, then I'm happy. I'm a little less concerned with the preciseness of the stitch or sticking with one stitch versus just trying to fill in the best I can, because of the surface and how I'm working. In addition, from an embroidery standpoint, typically on a when you're working on a hoop, you can go through the top and then back up. So like your needle's going through and back up. But because I'm working on a shoe, I can't do that. Thankfully, the mesh does separate. So there's this inside lining. And so what I'm doing is I'm just trying to keep it here. So it's working out well. But yeah, my goal is to just get it filled in the best I can with the best possible stitch that I can maneuver my needle to do. Yeah, so I'm using the DMC floss, which is kind of the industry standard, and for anybody interested, it's the 995 color. So I've got my floss. Because I'm working on something where I have to stitch through, I've been working with a, when I say stitch through, I'm not be able to go straight in and all the way out with a straight needle because I'm having to hook these mesh sections. To embroider, I am using a hooked needle. And then I have my scissors if I need them, which I can put over here. I have been finding that I've been using like just some regular needles sometimes when I need the help. And my thumbnail, my little, I just blanked on the word. My thumb, thimble, thank you, my thimble. Ay. Yeah, so those are my supplies. And where I am so far. So I've been pretty happy. So I finished that out, and then yesterday I worked on this section, was able to fill it in. I'm really happy with this section. It was a little bit easier to get a clean line around because this lifted up so well. So you can kind of see that it's not perfect under there, but I was able to get the stitch a little bit past so this lays on top. So I think that that's nice, and that's also going to be the case for all of this. The only part is going to be up here where again it is glued and I can't get as close, so I have to really kind of finagle it. So I've drawn out this pattern so far of the livery, and it's kind of my second or third time doing it. This is what I was working on to kind of figure it out. It looks really messy, but just trying to see how I want the livery to look on it. So this is a comparison of kind of what I'm referencing. So yeah, I'm trying to follow these lines best I can. So today live stream, I'm gonna see if I can just how well I can kind of stitch maybe this section and start filling it in. So I'm gonna work this section here because I feel like this is a pretty good I'm not going to change it necessarily in terms of the design. Up here I may have to like erase with the heat gun because I'm using erasable pens, which come to find out they are heat activated. So if I draw, I can just use a heat gun or a hair dryer to make it disappear. So that's where we're at with that is where we're at with the embroidery so far. I will say I'm getting a little bit more comfortable. This section took me about 3 hours, so I don't think that was too bad. I feel like that was a good amount of time to be working on it, and it didn't feel super slow. It felt productive, and everything like that. So, okay. So what I'm looking at right now is just where the stitch is falling on the shoe. I don't know if you can see that, but there's like a zigzag pattern that's going into the mesh. So right now I'm just kind of problem solving, like, okay, where do I want to start, and do I want to cover that? Like, where do I want my edge to start in relation to that stitch? So I have my floss. I've made a knot, and again, I'm using all 6 threads of the floss to just help it fill more, so I don't have to do multiple passes through the same hole, since this is a pretty wide mesh that I'm embroidering into. I did reach out to some of my embroidery friends just to kind of ask them questions, and I've been watching some YouTube tutorials just on different stitches and trying to see how I can improve since I am so new at this, and one thing I'm struggling with right now is as I go, the floss will start to unwind on me. And so then the little threads start to, it's a little precarious where I worry that they're gonna get snagged because they're not so wrapped on top of each other. So I'm gonna make an educated guess that that's because I keep changing the direction or the way that I'm threading in relation to the direction I tend to stitch is off. And so it's almost causing it to unwind, but I don't know. That's my theory. I'm not 100% sure if that's even a correct theory. Okay. So if I want to start here, I don't think I want to start here because I'll tell you why. Because the front of the shoe is definitely going to be seen, and so I want this to be a really clean line. So I'm going to start back here because I can't let the knot be on the other side. It's how I hide the knot. I need a little bit of space to be able to hide the knot. So I will start. I'm going to start back up in here. Back up in here. And then how I've been doing it, I don't know any other way for me to secure my knot is I'm just making the knot and then I put my yarn through basically a few of them, like 3 on each side. Because then I'm like, okay, well, it's looped in and it's like looped in on itself and it's not going anywhere. It's not going to pull out. Again, because these are sneakers and they are going to be worn, I want to make sure that my stitches are going to hold while the shoe is moving. So I want to make sure that I'm really securing how I'm attaching the floss and not just like wrapping it around itself and hoping it doesn't pull out. And here. That is not right. a little bit harder here because again, I'm working against that plastic. You can see here, like if I'm able to lift and get underneath, it really helps me get a cleaner line. I've been doing this kind of like back stitch bit, like a variation of a back stitch for the most part, and that seems to be working pretty well for me in terms of how it's filling. So I'm going to keep going with that. And what a back stitch is, my understanding, and again, I am no expert, I am just beginning in embroidery. But it's where when you stitch forward, you'll come back on yourself and loop it, so it's almost like it's looping. Like if you were to look at the fabric this way, it's like if you come up this way, you go here. So, right, so like if you come up this way, you're gonna go here and come back, right? But then rather than going forward again, you come back somewhere here in the middle before you go to the next one. And what that's doing is if I layer them on top of each other and I'm kind of stitching it that way, what I'm noticing is it's giving me a good width coverage to cover this mesh. I'm finding that that's so far the stitch that's working the best. That's also easy to kind of do with not being able to go traditionally down and up with a traditional needle, and I'm having to use the curved needle. So I hope I explained that well. So for example, here I went forward and I'm going to come back. So I'm going to come back over here and then I'll move forward again. So it's like I'm constantly going back on myself to increase the width of that stitch. It's been working well. So I'm going to keep going with it. And surprisingly, this is a little bit easier. Than the squares to get right up against that edge. So I don't have the yellow showing through. Yeah. So see how that's... So far that's been a good stitch for me, so I'm gonna keep at it. The other thing that I found is if I don't do too long of stitches, like it's been finding kind of like the right length of stitch for this needle and this mesh. So that's all been part of the learning curve. When I kind of think about like what I'm doing and what I'm learning and like my takeaways, is a lot of it's a feel thing. Meaning I find that with a lot of art, especially the craft arts, like there's a lot of tactile feel to it, meaning you kind of just try it and see what works, see what doesn't work. So I guess to be more specific in terms of like the embroidery here is, as I've been working, some of the things I'm paying attention to is like, okay, how difficult is it to get my needle into this type of a space or that type of a space? How hard am I like pulling tension wise, and what is like the right amount of tension so that everything stays in place, but it's not so tight that it's going to really pull on the structure of the shoe so much, but that it's not so loose that it's going to unravel as it's worn. So like that would be kind of like a tactile, it's hard to explain, but like those are some of like the just, I'm doing it by feel, that's going on while I'm working, that sometimes I'm not even aware that I'm doing, just because in general, like I've been crafting a very long time. I've been making stuff since I was little because it's just something that I'm interested in. I've always found myself being curious about like making stuff. I was exposed from my parents. Like my mom's a really crafty person and she exposed us to a lot of things, from like cake decorating as a kid to like basic sewing. I remember just doing like a lot of different like paper arts and projects, and of course like the ceramics and those type of stuff that you also get exposed to at school, at least in America. I'm not sure in other parts of the world, but I was fortunate enough to have that as part of, you know, my growing up. And then my dad's a really handy person. He was a woodshop teacher and you know, did drafting and photography, and so he just knew how to fix stuff around the house, and I found myself like being his helper growing up, and I learned a lot that way of just like, I just was curious of, oh, well, how does that work? Well, how does that work? And to this day, like I will go to a hardware store and I will just wander around looking at things. And what I mean by that is like, I just look at the material and be like, oh, okay, that's what this is used for. I wonder if it could be used in a different way. And I tend to like look at tools because sometimes I'm not always familiar with tools, and I'll go down the tool aisle and be like, oh, well, what are all the tools for? And okay, I know what that one does. I know what that drill does, but what about this one? And maybe I'll like jot the name down, and when I get home, I'll like do a YouTube search and kind of, you know, just like learn something new. And I think that that's just something that I've always been interested in. Yeah, it's just part of, I think, like my general curiosity as a kid and as somebody who likes to make stuff. So I've been doing this a really long time. And so like I said, sometimes I just don't always realize like how tactile things are and how it's like a feel thing of like how hard to push. Like right now it's like, okay, no, I'm not gonna ruin this shoe. No, I can push a little bit harder. Like, yeah, I gotta like get that in there to get that stitch going. That kind of stuff. It's just, the more you do, like, it just kind of comes to you. I don't know how else to put it. So if you're somebody who, I don't know, maybe isn't super like crafty or handy and wants to try stuff, like, just try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, you have to start over, or it doesn't work out and you learn something. Like, that's the worst that can happen, so just try. So much of what I've done, like, is just trial and error, because you never know if something's gonna work. Okay, I'm getting to this section. So remember how I talked about there's this zigzag stitch? I think I want to stay on the outside of that. Like, I don't want to cover over the zigzag, because the zigzag is really clean. So I want to stay on this side of the zigzag and really fill it through. I apologize, my nose is kind of pretty. It's the springtime, so the allergies are a little going. Sorry about that. Oh, I have to reset my clock. Let's just reset my clock and let's keep working a bit. I'll go for another 20 minutes and then I will take a break and chat through anything else. Hey Austin, welcome, how you doing? So how tight am I pulling on the floss each time? Is it incredibly tight? Great question. No, it's not. So let me see if I can give an example. So I don't want it to be so tight that, oh, here, let me show you. Let me see if I can give you an example. So right here, I'm just gonna do like an example that I will take the stitch out to help kind of show you visually what I'm talking about. So, okay, so I just went through here and this is a relatively long stitch, right? So in terms of how hard I'm pulling, I want it to pull where it pulls just enough where the floss is laying flat, but I don't want it to pull so hard that, see now how it starts to like pucker and it starts to pull this hole open? That's what I don't want to have happen. So I don't want the tension to be so tight that when I look at this hole, it's, can you see how it's altered there? Like, that's too tight. So what I would want instead is I would want the tension to be such where it's just a little bit, where, yeah, like there's a little bit of tension here, but it's not super tight, and this hole hasn't been altered, if that answers the question. So it's kind of, it's not super light where it's just like, oh, I'm not pulling at all, but it's just kind of a light pull. What would be something similar, like as you're kind of pulling? I'm trying to think of like a life example, if you're not used to embroidering, of what that could feel like. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. I'm trying to think of other instances where you lightly pull on something. Well, this is a fun exercise for me. What other ways that we lightly pull on something? So remember how I was talking about how my floss is constantly unthreading? I'm wondering if it's because sometimes I will load the floss this way and sometimes I'll load it this way on my hook, meaning like I'm changing the direction of my hook. So I'm gonna go from the inside to the outside and thread it that way and just see if that maybe helps with the unraveling of my floss as I'm working. Austin, I've not forgotten about you. I'm still trying to think of an example, a real life example that is not embroidery, as to how hard to pull. I mean, maybe it's like your shoelaces. So like as you're lacing up your shoelace, like you don't want your shoelace so tight that it's like squeezing your foot and it like really pulls and hurts and it's like pulling on the eyelets of the shoe. But you want it tight enough where like your foot isn't gonna slip out and fall out of it. So yeah, I think a shoelace would be probably something that we all do, where, you know, your shoelaces have enough tightness to keep your foot in place, but they're not so tight that they're like really yanking with a lot of tension. That would be a good example. I hope that answers your question. And thank you so much for asking that question. Okay. I'm really here right now. Oh, that was kind of exciting. I get really excited when things start to go well. I don't know about you, but I like to do the happy dance. So I'm doing right now, I'm gonna start using smaller stitches here for a couple reasons. Let me show you on this piece of paper what I mean. So a couple reasons I want to do a smaller stitch right now, because here I've just been trying to fill it because I don't think there's going to be a ton of movement in these sections. A, this is a stiff section, and B, this isn't really a section I think that bends much as I watch the shoe move. But in these sections, especially here where our foot bends, there's going to be a lot of movement on the shoe. And, you know, we all know that, like, that is where one of our creases comes from. If you pay attention to your shoes, this is a crease point for most people. And so I want smaller stitches, meaning I think I'm probably only going to go half a centimeter to a centimeter in my stitches, so that one, as the point creases, it's not a long piece of floss that's going to be moving and buckling. Instead, if it's shorter, it can't move as much. So that's reason one. And also, I think the second reason is because there's going to be that movement, like I don't want the threads to be shifting. As well as I'm trying to make a much straighter line, it's easier with small lines. So for example, if I'm trying to draw a circle, right, and I'm just doing it freehand, okay, that wasn't too bad. But often you can kind of like use small little lines. And you'll see this a lot as people draw, is they'll do like little small lines, maybe for a curve, to then get it to a slightly, like, it's just easier to connect little lines than it is to make one big line. So that's the other reason why I'm gonna go with smaller stitches here, is so I can have a more precise line, because I do want to, as you can see over here, I do want to, I'm referencing the paint, and you know, it's a very clean line on a livery and on a car where two different paint colors change. Like it's not a blurred line, it's a very clean, crisp line. So those would be the two reasons why I'm going to do my best to focus on a shorter stitch. And then I'm just going back through right now the let's see, is it better to go there or is it better to go here? Let me see. I was gonna say I'm going back through the same one, but I want to see which one's better. So either I'm going back through here, through the exact same entry point, or do I want to see what this is going to look like. Okay. I think it's the middle. All right. I did a test. And I think what's happening here is because I'm not doing like the embroidery from a place of talking and doing sometimes avails me. Okay, well, I can't get that out, so I'm gonna leave it as. Okay. Yeah, so that's actually working really well as a stitch. So, like I said, I think I'm finding my stitch. So it's kind of the best I can figure out as a back stitch. So I'm going up about 1, 3, about 3 mesh holes, and then I'm coming back right at the exact same spot that this yarn is coming down. So I'm using the exact same hole. And then I'm also being conscientious to have my yarn on the left side, in this case, of the needle instead of on the right side. So I guess on the outside rather than the inside. So you can see here, so when I pull, this yarn is on the inside, not on the outside. Okay? Because what that's doing is it's giving me a really clean line. There. Yeah, I'm really liking that. That's a really nice clean line. And as I fill it in, it's going to be really nice, I think. And I can get pretty good tension this way without it being overly tense. So I'm really happy right now. It's like a very satisfying feeling as you're working. You're like, oh, this is working well. Awesome. And that's really, I think for me, like making is just kind of that. It's asking like, okay, is this going to work? And if it doesn't work, like what did I learn and how can I adjust? You know, that's kind of what I've been doing with these stitches. And at the same time, like I could go back and redo it, but then again, it's just like, well, I want to get these shoes done, you know? I purposely started on the inside because, you know, as you're walking, the inside isn't gonna be as visually available as like the outside of the shoe. So, okay, that's why I chose the inside. So if it doesn't look perfect, it's fine. This is my first round and this side will look better, and I'll probably do the other shoe on the inside before I even start on the outside because it just gives me that much more practice. So yeah, like I think that's something else to think about of like, hey, if you're unsure, when I'm unsure and I want to start a project, I can either let that lack of certainty stop me dead in my tracks because I'm scared of it. And it's like, oh, but if I'm going to make a mistake and if it doesn't look good, which that does happen. If you also like to be creative, I think that that's kind of that version, whatever version of perfectionism creeps its way in. And I struggle with that a lot. Or I could kind of look at it and say, all right, well, where can I start where it's going to have the least amount of risk in terms of like, if I mess up, it's not that difficult to fix or tear it out, or nobody's going to see that, you know? Because I don't think I'm the only one who deals with, oh, but what if this doesn't look good? Yeah. So as you can see, like, so what I was meaning, like my needle's not on the inside, it's on the outside, if that makes sense. All right, I think I can get down to the toe area before we time to take a break. This is where my floss starts to separate a bit and I start to have that issue I was talking about. I'm gonna have to do some research on that because I don't necessarily like that. And I would like to learn what I'm doing that's causing that and if there's a way to avoid it. So I will this week reach out to friends that I have that also embroider and see what their thoughts are. So kind of reach out to my network and see what they think. And then I'll probably hit YouTube And I've been finding ChatGPT to be a very helpful solution solver because it acts so differently than a Google search. So I probably also go on ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT can do for me. All right. So I don't think I want to go all the way. So I think I'm pretty good. Just that is the end point. And I can. Start heading the opposite direction. I don't know if you guys saw what I did there, but I put the needle on the other side just to see how it would fall. Let's do one more and see. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I think it's time to rest my eyes. Take a little bit of a break. So I find that my eyes with the allergies, it's a little dry today. I've been very worried. I'm not gonna lie. I definitely would say I doubt myself a lot. Even though I say I've been crafting for a really long time, I definitely doubt my capabilities. And what I mean by that is I just sometimes think like, oh man, I said I could do this, and then what if I can't? And instead of approaching something with a, oh yeah, I think I can do that, if I approach it with the, oh yeah, I definitely can do that, then especially when I say I'm gonna do something and then I start to have doubts of like, oh, can I do this? Or, oh man, that was a half-baked idea. And I've been finding lately that I have been doing that a lot. And then that ends up causing me as a creative and as a maker, like a lot more stress than probably is needed, versus just being upfront and saying like, hey, I don't know if this is gonna work, or I'd like to try this, or even if I'm doing something for somebody else, being like, hey, I have this idea, it might not work out, but I'm gonna try, and you know, giving them more insight into like how I'm feeling and how I am trying to tackle what it is that I'm doing. Because so often I have in my head, and the story that I tell myself in my head is, oh, well, this person, you know, they can they know what I'm working on, or they're gonna understand that like what I'm doing and all the intricacies. And yeah, because they could do it themselves. But I think so often what I naturally gravitate towards and like to spend my time on is not what other people do, and maybe they don't actually think the way that I think, or they don't really know how I'm approaching it. And so if I say I can do this and they're like, well, this person knows what they're doing, you know, Erin knows what she's doing regarding this, like I have no idea, but she seems like she knows. Look, I'm just gonna trust that she knows. And so that's something that I've been working on with myself. And I think these shoes is like a good example of like, oh yeah, I could do that. And then I'm not really sure if I can, because I just quickly realized how difficult of a task this was. But then I kind of just had to say, well, am I gonna do this or am I not gonna do this? And why not just try? I mean, what's the worst that could happen? It doesn't work, and I change the idea. I rip it all out, or we do something else with the shoes. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's, you know, and I'm learning a lot in the process. And I think just reminding myself that I don't know about your relationship with failure or not doing something well. However, you know, my relationship is like, I don't like failing. I don't like that feeling because I feel like I'm letting somebody else down. I can't tell you exactly who, because those people that really care about me, like they stuck by my side no matter what. But I always feel like, oh, I can't fail. And then that kind of ends up stopping me in my tracks. And then that feeling, though, a lot of times is worse, because then I'll then deal with like frustration because I'm not working on the thing and figuring it out. I end up kind of regressing almost like a toddler. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but like sometimes when I see a toddler like losing their stuff out in public, like having one of them like on the ground crying temper tantrums, I get it. And I think, yeah, I feel like that inside too. Like, I get that. I get you, 3-year-old. It's really difficult when you can't explain how you're feeling and you just have all these emotions inside of you, and you aren't into grips with like how you're feeling. And so I'm constantly relating to that like toddler, because I think I regressed into that internally, but I don't let people know about that. So I don't know if you deal with the same thing. I'd be curious to know if you deal with the same thing, if that resonates with you in terms of like, oh yeah, I totally know what Erin's talking about, or yeah, no, girl, you crazy. But I'm finding like just getting back to work and working is really kind of the solution for me to understand how I'm feeling, not be so scared of something not working, realizing that like failure is actually a really good thing, and it tells me like, oh, well, this didn't work, so what can I make work? Oh, this worked this time. And so failure is actually a really good thing because it helps me learn. But it's just really interesting how I haven't necessarily was raised to think that way. And having to change kind of the way I view that has been interesting, and definitely some growth on my end. So yeah, thanks for listening as I take a break. And you know, sometimes I feel like I ramble on with my thoughts, but hopefully that was something you can relate to, or if not, then that's just me. I'm gonna guess it's not. I'm gonna make an educated guess. It's not just me. Yeah, and I think just being in tune with my feelings is something that I'm finding to be much more helpful. And identifying exactly what I'm feeling and what that feeling is trying to tell me. But that's just taken a lot of me asking why, like I'm trying to not ask why, because I find that why is not a helpful question. So often I'll ask myself like, what is this feeling trying to tell me? Like, what is this anger that I'm feeling trying to tell me, or this frustration, or this complete lack of motivation? Like, what is this feeling telling me? Where is it coming from? I don't know. I found that that's helpful. Sometimes I don't have an immediate answer, but at least it stews in the back of my mind. Yeah. Oh, Austin, thanks. It's not just me. Thank you. I'm glad it's not just me. I think You know, I'm starting to wonder if, like, the things I naturally feel that I think are so exclusive to me really aren't. And it's more of like, yo, this is just what it means to live and be and yeah, kind of exist as like a human. I don't know, it's like the human experience. And, you know, maybe we're all way more similar than we think. You know, we might not speak the same language. We might not come from the same cultural backgrounds. We might be raised with different belief systems. But there's so many things that we do have in common when it comes to like, yeah, like those overall feelings. But maybe how I feel them and what brings on those feelings and what makes those feelings happen is different for me than it is for you. Yeah, it's just really interesting. So, all right, let's do a little bit of a stretch break, because if you've been sitting at the computer as long as I have now for an hour, it's time for a little bit of stretch break. So we're gonna reach up and we're gonna just move to the side. Oh. I'm gonna do my favorite, like, behind my back, which always really helps. Oof. This really helps me between the shoulder blades. I hold so much tension there, especially when I'm embroidering, because it's like when you're on your phone, your head is like at this horrible, just like 45, and it just strains everything. So I find that behind the back really helps. All right, let's get some of this going. Gotta make sure I can, you know, get that lotion on my back. That's always the test. How much of my back can I actually cover in lotion? That always tells me if I'm stretching enough my arms. Because if I can't like reach my entire back, even if it's just like my fingertips to like lotion myself, then I know that I'm not stretching and my muscles are really tight. I don't know, that's my, hey, it helps me not feel so old. Oh. And keep myself moving. All right. I think I'll go maybe for like another 20 minutes and see if I can get that last line going. So. Okay. Let's get going. All right. All right. I had a really good interview with him. And Marie Forleo, who I love, who I've mentored with for a while. If you are a creative and you are not familiar with her, I think she's excellent in so many of the things that she presents and talks about. I would highly recommend checking her out. And yeah, it was a really good interview with him. Because I think he's just come out with a new book, Matthew McConaughey. All right. Not that anybody needed that, because, I mean, if you know his work, then you know that I was talking about him. But he just came out with a new book called The Green Light or something like that. I haven't read it. It's on my, I'm finishing up. I have another book that is going to take precedence before I get started on that book. But the interview was really good. And one of the things that he was talking about that really stood out to me was like the energy of wanting versus the energy of needing. And what I mean, and what he kind of talked about was just, you know, I think we've all been there. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know I've been there, where it's like you kind of put out this energy of like, I need this. I need this to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then oof, it kind of puts you like feeling desperate almost, like, oh, I really need this to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then I'm gonna not be in a good situation or whatever it is. And that kind of energy sometimes, at least for him in Hollywood, you know, it was one of those, like, that kind of energy will kind of ruin your career a bit. And I was thinking about that, I'm like, oh, I've done that before. But then he also talked about like wanting something, where it's like, yeah, he wants something, but that's not the same as needing it. And kind of just his experience around the difference between like wanting something and needing something. And that just because you want something, but you don't need it, doesn't mean that you're not going to work just as hard. Because so often, and for the longest time here, I've been trying to figure out, like, what do I want to be doing with my art? Like, how do I really want to be spending my time, as I am the type of person who I like a lot of different things. If I don't need this, like if I, you know, just because I want this, am I not going to work hard enough? Because I don't absolutely have to be doing it, right? It's a completely self-driven thing. And it just was like a really comforting thought regarding myself being able to reframe, like, no, just because I can say, oh, I don't need to have this, it doesn't mean I'm not going to work as hard, and I'm not going to put the effort into my craft. That I could. Ooh, I'm liking this. There's a little bit of spots where like the yellow is showing through. And maybe that's because my stitches are still too long, so I think if I shorten them up, that will help. But it's not super noticeable, and from far away, I don't think I'm really gonna notice it, so. I'm gonna go through this one again because I don't like how much yellow is showing. Yeah, it makes a difference to have it on the outside. Yep, that's all that needed. I will, if you're curious, put that interview in the comments of this video. So if you're watching the playback or you're watching live and you're curious to check it out, you can find that interview. Yeah. I'm saying, oh yeah, because as I've been making sure that the yarn is on the outside, it's really filling in like those gaps a little bit more that maybe were happening up here. So this is definitely the stitch for me right now. And it's quite soothing. So I'm making sure the yarn is on the inside rather than on the outside. And I'm finding that that is then making it so it's butting up next to the other stitch much closer. And so I'm not seeing any yellow through, showing through. So that is good. It means I'm figuring it out. Yay! I'm sure. Thank you. So let me stop for a second and do that right now. I know I've had some recent subscribers, and I really want to thank you so much. Like, it means so much that anybody would subscribe to my channel as well as watch these live videos. It really means a lot to me that you're showing up, that you're just curious in what I'm doing. So thank you so much. Really. I really do mean it. And I will make sure I end with my quote. You know what's great about this stitch is it's gonna make it pretty easy, I think, to do this pattern and have it feel pretty consistent. Oh, this is gonna be great. And so this right here, what I do is I just kind of go over it and like cut it off. That's how I've been hiding it. It's kind of, like I said, a technique from all my crocheting, where like in crocheting, your threads that are sticking out, if you do a color change or you have to add more yarn, you end up just having to thread it back through. And so you end up threading the yarn back and forth. And so that's kind of where that's coming from. So yeah, it's kind of cool how when you start to work in different mediums and things like that and try a lot of different things, you're like, oh, when I work in this way, I do this. I wonder if on this material, the same thing will work. Kind of like cooking, right? Like once you know some basics and you're like, okay, you realize like, oh, I could substitute this or like use this technique. I think it's very similar when it comes to crafting and making. When you kind of just have some base knowledge, it becomes easier to problem solve and to substitute and swap in techniques and things like that. So this is what I'm talking about, where like the yarn, I think I'm starting with too long of a piece, because by the time it gets here, this has been better. You know what it is? I did it again. That's exactly what it is. I just noticed this last time I threaded it, well, maybe it's not exactly, so, but, well, that's gone. Like I threaded it going this way instead of consistently going out this way. So I'm wondering if that really was the kicker as to why it wasn't separating. And now it is. That is my hypothesis. Let's see. Let's see as I continue if my hypothesis is right. I'm almost at the end of this anyway, so. There really are some very like minor things that feel so minor with embroidery, but make a lot of difference. It's really interesting how sometimes it's those nuances that you don't know until you start doing, or like that's another reason to like watch people and learn from people who have been doing it a lot longer and have more skills than you, because you will learn those things because hopefully they will share them, but also they'll have learned them just also out of trial and error. And how great is it that we live in the age of like YouTube and things like that and all the online courses you can take, so you actually can have access to this kind of information no matter where you are. I think it's so cool. Oh, awesome. I get my shoes. Yes, you get your shoes. They're coming along. I'm very glad that you're so happy. It makes me very happy when you get so happy. Okay. Oh, here we go. I'm really thankful that that piece lifts up. It's on the right side. Okay, I'm gonna switch to a different mic. I'm so sorry. My camera turned off, and that is where I have my mic. So, my apologies. My camera turned off. Hopefully you can hear me now. Let me know if that is the case. And if it is, I will re-say everything I just said. And I will figure that out. I don't know why my camera shut off unless it wasn't powering while it was in use. I think it's picking me up now. It's probably just not the best audio. So yeah, I wanted to say thank you for joining me. I've really enjoyed sharing this space with you. Okay, great, audio's back. Yeah, so my camera shut off, and then that also turned off my mic. So my apologies there. So I finished up this row. I will just secure it and fasten it off by kind of weaving everything back in, and then I will start on another row and just start working that way. Here over the next few days. I will be back next week. I've already put up the link so you can join me next Wednesday as I keep working. And I think my goal is going to be to have, I don't know, more of this done, maybe a lot more of it done. I'm not really sure how far I will get, but that is the plan there. And like I said, I wanted to end with the quote because the whole reason I started this channel was to give myself a reason to show up as an artist, as a creative, as somebody who likes to make stuff, and to be okay with failure, with not doing it right and being on camera and just kind of having to problem solve it out and just allow myself to be in the process and show up. So thank you for being here with me. And this is a quote from the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. At the heart of artistic avoidance is the denial of process. We like to focus on having learned a skill or having made an artwork. This attention to final form ignores that creativity lies not in the done, but in the doing. That's always such a good quote for me to think on and remember on, that what I make and my art practice is just that. It's a practice. It requires me to do. It requires me to show up for myself, and that's why I show up here. And I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart that you're showing up with me. It means a lot that you would spend the time to be interested in what I'm doing, that you're curious, that you're asking questions, that you've subscribed. All of it just means the world to me, and I look forward to getting to know you better through the comments. Enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye!